Hi, church. It's good to be with you again. I truly hope all of you are well. I've enjoyed maybe speaking to some of you by phone, and I'm grateful for those who have rang to speak to me. And I trust this finds you blessed, and I'm grateful that you've joined to watch another Bible study. We're going to continue on in our series in Jonah, and I think I've only got about another 3 sermons left in me on Jonah. And when you think about it, there's only about 50 verses in the entire book, but it reveals so much to us about who God is that it's nice to be able to go slowly and methodically through it. So yes, if you can, I've included the handout with it, and if you're able to, print it off or follow along on your screen. And we're gonna go through Jonah chapter 3 verses 6 to 10 then. And I'll introduce the booklet. I'll just read the front cover. It says and I've entitled this The King of Kings. The king of Nineveh was master of all that he saw. He was God of his own thinking, that is, until he met the King of all kings. And this is an encounter, a brief encounter of somebody who considered himself a king who met with God. If you can, again, I'd encourage you to read the entire book. As I say, it's only 50 verses, something around that. And you could do that in 5 minutes, but it just gives you a head start to get your brain thinking about some of the verses that we'll be covering and we'll be talking about today. And we will be talking, as I said, from verse 6, to verse 10. So if you can, turn in your Bibles, please, as we read together. Jonah chapter 3 then, please. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows, God might yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger, so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Well, that's a wonderful bit of text, but if you remember even from last week how Jonah even states how all had turned to the Lord, from the great to the small. And it's quite striking that there's some bits of repetition here. But here we see all of Nineveh fasting from bread, from water, from everything. Not just them, but their flocks, their animals, their children, everybody fasted. I find this interesting as we're coming up to May, which last year was our month of prayer and fasting, and this year, though we're at home, we're going to continue to pray together and fast together. We'll probably have more Zoom meetings. I'm not actually sure how it's going to work. We have a calendar system that we're working at, and we'll hopefully get out while this video is being broadcast, while it goes out. And it will give you options to choose days in which you would like to fast. But so yeah, anyway, we went slightly off topic there. Yeah, we have Jonah, and he's not in this section of the text. The main characters that we see here are the king, the nobles, but most of all, this tells us about God and about who he is. And in order to engage with the text, I've written here, this is a story to tell us about God. Jonah is a picture of fallen man, but here the king of Nineveh steps in as an image of humanity. He steps into Jonah's place here. Jonah went to Nineveh to proclaim the message that God has given him, but God didn't do what he proclaimed through Jonah. Have you thought about that? Did God give his word and take it back? What's actually at play here? I mean, this text reveals a lot about God, but we need to understand what it says to understand what God is saying. And the purpose of the questions that I'm asking you to look at the text for yourself is to see what the author is trying to say about God's nature. And some of these questions are, why do you think the king is focused in on here? I mean, when we left in verse 5, uh, it was proclaimed that all, great and small. But why was the king focused in on here? Why do you think? Discuss it and see. What was the king's proclamation, and why? Why did he proclaim what he did? And how did the king understand what the actions of his city are? How did he understand that his actions and the actions of his people were evil? Um, Jonah didn't go around with a list, or at least we don't have the full transcript of his sermons, but certainly he proclaimed judgment because of an offended God, because of the God who they had offended, and the people listened to this. But how did they know and understand that what they did was evil? This may take a while to communicate and to think about, but have a think about it and see what answers you can come up with. Um, yeah, and most of all in this, did God break his word when he did not destroy the great city? Or perhaps did he change his mind? Who did the Ninevites believe, and what does this mean? Um, yeah, Jonah's message did not come to pass. How would he have felt about that? And use your imaginations. Put yourself into Jonah's shoes. Um, Jonah was sent there by God, and he went reluctantly, fearing for his life, fearing for a lot of things. And Jonah was given a message that this will happen in 40 days, and it didn't. How would Jonah have felt? Discuss how we would feel uh, about if God made us that we looked the fool. Yeah, I've said here, discuss together how we would feel about making us look the fool for His glory. Are we prepared to be hated and rejected and despised and foolish for His service? Jonah found this difficult, and we'll come into that over the next few weeks. But I'm asking the question that we could ask together. Would you find it difficult to be a fool so that he is proclaimed as wise, to be hated so that reconciliation could be made? We see in the New Testament Christ's example, but look, come up with some of your own thinking and see what you think yourself. The king teaches us a lot about ourselves. This king does. What humility looks like without, and what humanity rather looks like without restraint and without revelation. It is by God's restraint that the nations are not more wicked than they are. History records how Nineveh actually from this day turned back to their evil ways and how it was overthrown and fell into judgment. But they took grace seriously at this stage. And let us take grace seriously. So I've asked the question again, as I do every week, because this is what the text is teaching us. What does this text teach us about God, about humanity, and about sin? So I'm interested in hearing some of the things that you come up with, and perhaps you could text and let me know. But for now, I'll be back in a few minutes. If you would go through some of these and talk through those questions together, and then we'll carry on with our text, getting into it. Thank you.